Welcome back to Andersen Acres. Today we're going to focus on one of the best ways to fill your summer garden with color and texture, bulbs and tubers. These little powerhouses might not look like much when you bring them home. They look like a dried up lump of root or a papery bulb, and that doesn't exactly scream beauty and color. But give them the right care and they'll transform your garden into a showpiece of blooms. So let's get practical. We'll talk about the difference between bulbs and tubers, how and when to plant them, how to get a head start by starting them indoors, and how to care for them if you live in a colder climate like I do. It's 40 below here for a lot of the year. Yeah. We live in a colder climate and they do take some special care if you do get frigid temps in the winter. But by the end of this video, you will be ready to tackle bulbs and tubers in your garden if you so wish. If you don't love the plants that grow out of tubers and bulbs, just skip this video. Not everyone loves the specific plants you can grow with your bulbs and your tubers. But first, let's clear up what we mean when we say bulbs versus tuber. Because although we often talk about them in the same breath, so we talk about a bulb and a tuber and we almost don't care about the difference, they're not the same thing. A bulb, like a lily or a tulip, is essentially a tightly packed storage unit. So it's nice and tightly packed, and it's full of everything the plant needs to sprout. Think of it kind of like a little onion-like package with layers for storing food for growth for that plant. A tuber, like a dahlia or a canna, is kind of like a swollen root. Instead of layers like an onion, it's kind of a thickened underground stem that stores energy. So it looks like a big fat root. Okay, that's what a tuber is. Both are planted for the same essential reason: beautiful flowers, lots of color. But the difference affects how you handle them. For example, a lot of tubers need to be dug up and stored in the fall. Well, some bulbs can survive year-round in the ground depending on your climate. It depends on the plant and whether it's a tuber or a bulb. We have to pull all our tubers. It's 40 below here in the winter. We have to pull all our tubers. We store them in the basement over the winter, cool, dry location, make sure they don't sprout, and then we put them back in the ground when it warms up in the spring. Bulbs, depending on the bulb, some of them we can leave. Some of them we can leave in the ground and we're fine. So again, it very much depends on your climate. But whether you are planting bulbs or tubers, the soil has to be just right. These kind of plants hate sitting in soggy soil, so drainage is key. A well-draining loam is really ideal, but you can improve clay or compacted soil by working in compost, sand, or even a little peat moss to help water move through. I prefer sand. Mixing a little bit of sand really allows those tubers and those bulbs to get the aeration and dry out the way they need, and it just helps them thrive. But you can use something else. I just prefer sand. Soil temperature also matters. Bulbs and tubers should only go into the ground once the danger of frost has passed and the soil has warmed up. So if you've had to pull your plants, don't put them back in the ground until the frost is gone. Cold, wet soil can rot them before they even get a chance to sprout at all. And if you're impatient, don't worry. You actually can start them indoors, and I usually do because we have a short growing season. We'll talk about that in a minute. So, once the weather is right, it's time to plant. The general rule is to plant bulbs 2 to 3 times their own depth, own height, deep. So if your bulb is that big, you would plant it that deep. Okay? So if your bulb is 2 inches tall, you want it 4 to 6 inches below the surface. That gives it room to grow. Okay? Place them with that pointy side up. So a bulb looks like an onion. Point that top, that little pointy top needs to be facing upward. Okay? Because that's where the plant actually emerges, where the shoots actually emerge. If you plant it upside down, it's going to have to basically do this in order to grow, and it's never going to. Okay, it is not going to make it. Tubers are not planted as deep. Just a couple inches of soil covering them is good enough. But check the instructions that come with the specific tuber you purchased. Some of them are a little bit different. Dahlias, for example, are planted so that the crown, the plant where the stem meets the tuber, sits just under the soil. Gladiolus, it's usually about 4 inches deep. So it varies a little bit. They're not as deep as bulbs, but the exact depth varies depending on the plant you're planting. Spacing is also important, okay? Give lilies at least 8 to 12 inches between bulbs, while things like dahlias or cannas may need like a foot and a half to spread out. It depends on the plant. Crowding them too close can lead to weak plants and fewer blooms. So look at the type of plant or flower it is. See how far it spreads. If it's only yay wide, it doesn't need a ton of space. But if it really spreads out as a plant, then you're going to want to make sure it has enough space to grow so it doesn't get all tangled in the plant beside it, and so that it has access to the proper nutrition in the soil, the sunlight, all the good stuff that plants need in order to grow. So as soon as your bulbs or tubers are tucked into the ground, you have to water them well to settle the soil. After that, you want to keep the soil evenly moist, kind of damp, but you don't want it sopping, okay? Dry soil can stall growth, but too much water will rot the underground parts, so you have to be careful. Think of it kind of like Goldilocks gardening. Not too little, not too much, just right. Fertilizer a little bit at the beginning can help them get off to a strong start. I like a balanced slow release fertilizer at planting time because that works really well for us. Later, as plants are actively growing, you can give them a boost every few weeks of a liquid fertilizer if you like, but I still prefer the slow release. Okay, but adding a fertilizer, especially to plants that have been established and are a couple years old, it can really give you stronger stems and bigger blooms. Just avoid those high nitrogen fertilizers. These push a lot of leafy growth at the expense of flowers. And generally with tubers and bulbs, you planted them for the flower. So don't go for something nitrogen heavy. You'll get a lot of greenery, very few flowers. If you don't want to wait until midsummer for flowers, you can give your bulbs and tubers a head start indoors. This is what I usually do because it's freaking cold here for a freaking long time and I want some flowers. So we start indoors. About 4 to 6 weeks before your last frost date, plant them in like 4-inch pots, 4-inch around, right? So plants that are 4 inches around. Plant them in 4-inch pots with a good potting soil, not soil from outside. Get a good potting mix from your garden center. Just one pot or tuber per, one tuber or bulb per pot. Okay? Don't crowd them. One per pot. Let them settle. Let them bloom, let them emerge without having to compete with other plants. You want to keep the soil moist but not soggy, and place the pots in a warm, bright location. A sunny window usually works, but grow lights are even better for a strong, sturdy shoot. It depends what kind of sunlight you're getting. So if you really are in a shady location, just grab yourself a couple of grow lights. Again, your garden center has them. You just plug in a couple of grow lights, boom, you have light. Okay, so as soon as the leaves appear, you want to keep watering regularly and then start feeding them lightly with a slow release fertilizer until they're ready to go outside. Once the frost is gone for good, you want to harden off your plants by setting them outside for a few hours a day before you transplant them into the garden. Because if you grab them and you immediately go, boom, you're outside now, you're planted, they might basically go into shock and not make it. You want to avoid the shock by sudden planting, and you'll get earlier blooms and a longer flowering season if you are gentle with your plants. So let them harden off outside for about a week and then plant them. Okay, you'll just get better plants. If you live in a colder climate like us, you'll want to think about what happens in the fall. Tender bulbs and tubers like dahlias or gladiolus, they can't survive freezing temperatures in the ground. Okay, so if you're like us and you have frigid winters, you probably have to dig them up. After the first frost kills the foliage, so you still want to wait for the frost. So wait for that killing frost. It kills off that foliage. Then you want to carefully dig them up so you don't damage your bulbs or your tubers. You don't want to destroy everything. There's a mosquito. But you don't want to destroy everything. You want to definitely be very careful when you're digging it up. And once you do that, brush off the excess soil and let them dry for a day or two in a cool, shaded spot. Okay, so put them under shade on your deck or just leave them outside but cover them so they're not getting a bunch of sun. You want to kind of let them dry out a little bit, and you want them almost to cure, almost to start hardening, just for a couple of days. Then you can store them indoors. You can do what we do and pack them in boxes with like sand or even paper bags. We do that just to keep them from getting completely destroyed, and keep it out of reach of cats. They do tend to like to chew up your tubers and your bulbs. One, poisonous to the cats. Two, bad for the plants. So keep them away from your cats. You want to keep them somewhere that's cool and dry, ideally 40 to 50 degrees Fahrenheit. So above freezing, but not warm. Basically, think if your hands are cold, but you're not freezing, that's probably a good temperature to store your bulbs and your tubers. Okay? Because if it's too warm, they're going to sprout early. If it's too cold, they'll freeze. So if you're going to go to the trouble of bringing them indoors, make sure you store them at the correct temperature. When spring returns, they're going to be ready to go back out into the ground. Some gardeners dedicate a bed just for tender tubers, so they're easy to dig up each year without disturbing plants. I like to have these little dragonfly bits, and I stick them in where I bury all my tubers and my bulbs. That means I can find them easier in the fall after everything's died off. I can find them, dig them up, and store them appropriately without disturbing all my other plants. But you can either have a dedicated bed or find some way to mark your locations so you can find them easy enough in the fall. So, even with the best of care, sometimes things do go wrong. If your bulbs don't sprout, the most common causes are rot from too much water or planting them in soil that stayed a little bit too cold. If your plants sprout but don't bloom, they might need more sun or more fertilizer during the growing season. Pests can also be an issue. Squirrels are famous for digging up bulbs, and slugs love the tender shoots. A little fencing, mulch, or even just keeping an eye out can save you a lot of frustration. Now that is about it for me here today at Andersen Acres. Summer blooming bulbs and tubers are really an incredible way to bring color and height and beauty to your garden with just a little planning. And you'll be able to enjoy them year after year if you take care of them. And remember, if you're in a cold climate, get them inside for the winter. Store them in paper bags in your basement, cool, dry location. They'll be fine. So drop a comment below and tell me, are you enjoying growing tubers and bulbs, or are you about to abandon it? It's about 50-50, I find. Some people love these plants and some people just would rather not have the hassle. It's an individual thing. We'll see you tomorrow.